Welcome to the last day of Virtual Empower 2020. We've made it to day 5 and we're so happy you've been with us until now. We've got yet another great program for you today, so stay locked in. A quick reminder that if you want to receive a Virtual Empower 2020 certificate, you must fill out a post-conference survey after the closing ceremony, which you can access from the menu on the left-hand side of your dashboard.
Now we start day 5 with a webinar that will share practical examples of how young people are shaping good governance practice, peace and critical thinking, as well as education of marginalized children and youth. As usual, we are encouraging you to get engaged and ask questions to the panel of the speakers. To moderate this discussion, we have an international expert in youth and peace building. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very pleased to introduce to you Romiral Ortiz.
Okay, so welcome to everyone and thank you so much for joining. Last day of the Virtual Empower Conference, Youth Mobilization for Inclusion, Peace and Security. And in particular, welcome to this webinar where we'll be asking some important questions around how are young people shaping more equal, just and peaceful societies. And before we actually start, also wanted to thank our panel and of course, Education Above All, and reach out to Asia for hosting this webinar. We are really delighted to be here, and personally, I'm really looking forward for the discussion, and I hope everyone will be very eager to ask questions, because actually for this webinar, we'll be looking into very practical example from our speaker, who will be sharing from their own experiences on actually how themselves as young people they have been and are shaping good governance. So we'll have Brian from the Philippines to discuss a little bit more on that, but also how shaping peace and critical thinking with Ajmal from Afghanistan, and also what does it mean to actually support, promote education as a tool for empowerment for marginalized children and youth, with the example of Indira from Cameroon. And first of all, I maybe forgot to introduce myself. So my name is Rameral. I'm currently in Spain, and I'm very thankful to actually be moderating this discussion. And I will be doing my best to make it interactive. So please make sure to also ask your question and anything you would like to further discuss on the Q&A chat box. So we'll have some time to actually reply to this question. And yes, without further delay, I would like to maybe give a very short introduction from our presentation from our panel, and then we'll move towards the very first question. So welcoming Indira, who is from Cameroon and who is regional coordinator at Local Youth Corner in Cameroon for Far North region. So she has very extensive experience and expertise in the field of peace building and countering violent extremism as activist for more than 5 years. So her field of study is more related maybe to communication, public action, international policies, etc. But she has been so much involved in anything related to education, reintegration of children affected by Boko Haram insurgency in the country. So I hope she will be able to share a little bit more with us of some very important projects they have been implementing in the country around creative skills for peace, and then the whole question of rehabilitation, reintegration of former violent offenders within prison as well. Then we also have Brian. Hi, Brian. Nice seeing you as well. From the Philippines, youth lobbyist, human rights activist, and good governance advocate. With all the experience you have around working with local governments, but in general with the government in the country, also how you have been involved with youth parliament and congresses, etc., but also with civil society organization. So I hope there will be a lot of learnings from your discussion as well. And last but not least, Ajmal from Afghanistan, right now in Kabul, who will be sharing about the organization and the work they are doing from APT, which is Afghan from Progressive Thinking, and talking quite a lot around the question of leadership. So how young people can really take this leader's role when it comes to promoting and further strengthening peace in the country and for positive change. as well. So that's for the introduction. And again, thanks to everyone for being with us. I know it's the last day. A lot of very important, interesting discussion has been happening previously. So I hope this will be a very nice, I think, almost last webinar for today. So without further delay, so I would like to start with the very first question that I would like to be asking our panel. And actually, maybe Brian, you will be able to start, where I would like to ask you to introduce a little bit more of your work. So I at least put the topic, which is the good governance, but maybe you would like to share a very practical example. And as you start, I will also be sharing from my screen a picture that you share with us to actually illustrate and inspire us, which is also part of the objective of this session, where we hope really to inspire other young people to take this leadership role. So yes, if you would like to maybe unmute and start sharing about your work and what has been inspiring you to actually get involved as a youth leader in your community. And thanks, Brian, for being here with us. And I will be sharing my screen.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Brian Ezra Gonzalez. I'm from the Philippines. I'm the president of the National Society of Parliamentarians, which is a broad network of parliamentarians and policy advocates in the Philippines. We are working towards the enrichment and development of parliamentary practice and legislative research and policy advocacy in the country. We have conducted a lot of youth parliaments across the country. I am actually an elected member of the country's sole youth parliament mandated by law under Republic Act 8088, which is the National Youth Parliament. I think there are countries that have similar institutions, such as India and the United Kingdom. We are mandated by the National Youth Commission here in the Philippines to propose legislation to our legislators in the House of Representatives and the Philippine Senate. After my term in the NYP, or National Youth Parliament, I was able to have different roles in the conduct of national and local parliaments and congresses, which aim to equip young people with the skills and the knowledge they need, so that they can effectively engage with our congressmen, our senators, our local legislative bodies, which we call sanggunian. So I'm also an elected member of a youth council. We have this system in the Philippines called the Sangguniang Kabataan, or the Youth Council, wherein every village has its own council led by young people. So we implement projects and we propose policies related to youth development in line with the Philippine Youth Development Plan. So I have been in this work for the past few years along with my organizations. We believe that you do not need to be an elected member of government to actually engage government. You can do that by being a lobbyist, by conducting dialogues with your local governments and the national government. In terms of peace building, because a lot of, I think my other fellow speakers are going to talk about peace, I would like to recall one of the most inspiring things that my grandfather once said in a news interview, because he's a politician here in the Philippines. He used to be a politician here in the Philippines. He said that people rebel and people take up arms when they feel that they are unheard by the government. And this is something that I've been living up to for the past few years. Ever since I was a child, I've been dreaming to be part of the government. And right now, I'm working to enhance engagements between young people and the government, because we want to see more people, more young people, going in droves to the lobbies of our House of Representatives in the Senate and our local governments. So if people feel that the government is listening to them, if people know how to engage government, that could be a deterrent against violent extremism. And that's something that I think we are not only working for here in the Philippines, but it's also something that is being done in other countries. And I think our other speakers can elaborate on that.
Thank you so much, Brian. And maybe you want to say just a few words about that picture and how something that has been inspiring you to be a young leader in your community. So let me just put it back for a second, and maybe Brian, you would like to share it for a few seconds. I hope you can see it.
Yeah, actually, this is a picture from one of our engagements in the southernmost, in one of the southernmost areas in the country, Cotabato City, on the island, in the island of Mindanao. So Mindanao has been the hotbed of armed conflict and violent extremism for the longest time due to a myriad of historical injustices against the country's national minorities and the country's cultural minorities. So this is the Bangsamoro Model Youth Parliament. We conducted this. We were invited by the Office of the Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process, wherein we gathered around, I think, 70 young leaders from the entire Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. Then called the ARM, or Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. So we convened them so that they can propose legislation for consideration of the Bangsamoro Parliament, which is the governing body of what was just recently established, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. Um, the BARM, or the Bangsamoro Parliament, was actually the product of a very long and tedious peace process. And we believe, on our part, the part of the National Society of Parliamentarians, that if you involve young people in decision making, if you empower them to propose to government whatever solutions they have in mind, to address the different issues in their communities, um, we can pave the way for a stronger and more robust peace in the region, which has long been suffering from all sorts of violence these past few decades. So our young parliamentarians from the Bangsamoro were able to propose, I think, around 9 acts of parliament, which are now being deliberated on in the Bangsamoro Parliament, which was just established last year. So they are on their way towards a more autonomous government body. They're on their way towards having a sense of self-determination in their region. So this is something that the National Society of Parliamentarians has been working on, and up to now, most island of the country, in pushing for local legislation on peace building and other advocacies.
Thank you, Brian. I already have so many questions, follow-up question for you, but I will keep it chat box. And welcome to everyone. I see a lot of people joining from so very diverse part of the world, so super nice. I can see right now from, of course, Qatar, Pakistan, Sierra Leone, Nepal, Sudan, Morocco, etc. So super nice. And before I give the floor to our next speaker, and that would be Indira, I just wanted also to mention that we have Saji on board, always supporting and with us. Sorry, I forgot to mention at the beginning, as Indira was saying, he's our youth, peace and security father somehow. So very important to mention, and also credits to him. And thank you for gathering us here, Saji. So thank you, Brian, again. I think already very important points that you mentioned about how can we feel heard when it comes to inclusive decision-making processes, how as youth leaders we can be part of that process, how we can actually maintain the participation and inclusion. So we might discuss a little bit later on that. But now, Indira, I hope you can hear us. I know it's a little bit complicated for you now with the camera, but I hope at least the sound will work for you also to share a little bit more on the work you are doing around education and the role of young people in actually reintegrating children affected by the Boko Haram insurgency, with the case of Cameroon. But
Okay. Thanks,
yours.
Robert. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, and welcome to everyone. So I'll be presenting the Salam initiative, because this is the project we are implementing to avoid the radicalization of displaced children who have been affected by the Boko Haram crisis in the Parliament region of Cameroon. So Mora is a locality that is receiving like more than 1,000 displaced people in the community. And we have realized that children are most of the time the most affected population. So most of them are in the town and has entered the Almajiri system. And most of them are in the town and has entered the revenge targets of targets of and all they have seen about all these attacks and terrorist. And we are working a free formal education is safe children at base for this children equally. We are trying to initiative to avoid to community and to give them hope to go to it. Hope because they've lost. What can they do else? A situation, give them access to education and just situation. But our children, we have been very sad. We free to find that we are giving them formal education. Among these children, many of them whom were not reading social support. 60%, but I can bet you in the beginning, no one can speak French, no one can speak English, but now at least they can read and write. It's equally our satisfaction to see like 40, because we have them, 40% of these children can now have hope and say they want to be doctors, they want to be teachers. So we are seeing the improvement and really we are satisfied because the project, the Salam initiative, is not only local youth corner, but it's equally a community project. Because let me tell you, most of the religious traditional leaders are equally supporting the idea. Like one of the Quranic teachers told me, it is really one of the best ideas because he told me they can only give them Quranic education because they don't have a means to give them formal education. So for them, they are satisfied to see that there are youth, there's a youth-led organization who want to give them access to formal education while they are equally having this Quranic education. So the project is not really funded, but at least it is we are having many volunteers who want to really make the thing, the change in this community. So we are having teachers volunteer, we are having equally those working in the organization, going there and giving them sexual and have social support activities, recreative activities for them to heal their trauma and help them move ahead.
Thank you, Indira. And before we move to, last but not least, our dear guest Ajmal, I also wanted to share a picture that you shared with us that you found inspiring from the work you are doing. So hopefully you can just give us like in really 2-3 sentences, why did you select that picture and maybe what does it say, what's the message behind? So if you give me just 1 second, it will come on the screen. I think hopefully you can all see the picture with also the banner education, a tool to prevent violent extremism. So I don't know, Indira, if maybe in 2-3 sentences you would like to tell us what is the message for you behind this picture?
Romaral, the message behind this picture is very, very impacting because, you know, going towards children who are targets to radicalization, who have never been to school, who have been traumatized because of violent conflicts and everything. And today they have the hope because they want to be educated and tell themselves there is hope for them to be more than what they believe they can be. So for us, it was really a satisfaction to see children who can't even read or write today. They can read and indicate parts of the body. So it were really interesting and really satisfying, and it's really a picture that is describing really what we are doing and what we want to do.
Thank you, Indira, for sharing. I think very strong message that you were mentioning to all of us. No, this question of how do we heal trauma, psychosocial support, how do we provide hope, how important it is also when we speak about peace building and how we can be multipliers and leaders for others, as I could understand from the work you are doing in the community. So thank you so much, Indira. Again, lot of question, and I also took note of some of the questions that we are having on the chat box. So thanks for everyone who is asking some questions there as well. And we can maybe connect with the next question, which was a little bit on why do you think it's actually so important for young people to be engaged in this topic? So if we talk about good governments, you can start maybe.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much, Rumler, for the briefing. I would also thank the Education for All and team of the for organizing and hosting such an effective discussion. I'm honored being part of this webinar. As mentioned, my name is Ajmal Ramyar and I'm the Executive Director of Afghans for Progressive Thinking, a youth-led professional organization that has members over 34 provinces of Afghanistan, works to promote youth leadership, education, and a culture of peace in Afghanistan. Since its inception in 2010, APT activities impacted and inspired over 40,000 students to build a vision for just and inclusive Afghanistan and work as peace builder to contribute to positive change in their communities. APT works focuses on three areas: capacity building through debates and leadership programs, research and advocacy through publication, conferences, and media talk shows, research and networking event through exposure trip within Afghanistan and abroad. Our debate activities mainly focuses on building critical thinking of youths and university students. Our research and advocacy engage youths in decision-making process. They are paving way for Afghan youth to involve in the peace process and also in the key position in the government. And also our exposure trips and alumni community events helps the students to get connected from different backgrounds with each other, and also they build their network of friendship. Since 2018, APT is running an elementary school for displaced children, for internally displaced children in northern city of Afghanistan. In 2013, our organization, together with UNOI and few other youth organizations, started advocating for 2250 Youth Peace and Security Agenda, which was passed in 2015. As to localize this resolution in Afghanistan, and also in the light of this historical document, we initiated the program of Afghan Youth Representative to the United Nations program. In 2018 and 2019, two representatives were briefed the UN Security Council about the Afghan youths. They conveyed the message of Afghan youth that Afghan youths are striving for peace and war are not the choice of Afghan youths. So these youth representatives were the model and examples of millions of youths that are striving for peace, and also they are working hard in Afghanistan to bring and create stable, inclusive and peaceful Afghanistan. Last year, as I have shared one of the pictures that we brought hundreds of youths from 34 provinces of Afghanistan. So these youths were from rural and urban areas of the different provinces of Afghanistan that are under war conflict. They are under the control of the Taliban, and also the government don't have any reach to that provinces. So we brought these youths together. They have talked about the Afghan peace process and also the role of youths in the Afghan peace process. The outcome of this JIRGA was drafting the resolution that focuses on the role of young generation on peace process and also to create a peaceful Afghanistan. We have also shared this resolution with the Afghan government and also the international community. In Afghanistan, the youth are, because the 62% of generation are made of the youths, and they make the majority of the population. So my passion and my interest to get involved in this peace building work as Afghan youth is traced back to the war conflict time that we have spent in Afghanistan. So most of the families fled from their own homes. They have been immigrant to the other countries. So still the war has taken the lives of thousands of youths and young generation, because in different sides, if it's in the government side or if it's anti-government sides, the young generation are being killed. They are the victims of these wars. So we believe that that Afghan youths have a clear vision, they have energy, and they have the passion to bring changes and play a greater role in the peace building. Additionally, the resolution 2250, 2415, and 2535 on youth peace and security, which was passed by UN Security Council, gave the energy to the young generation of Afghanistan that they should play a critical role in the peace building and also in the peace process. The result of our work, we see that most of our young generation, most of our members that work at APT and also that was a part of our members, or we have trained them. So they are now working in the key position in the government. Most of them, or they have their own initiatives. They are running their own organization. They are promoting youth leadership and contributing to just and inclusive society. And we're always supporting them, and we are looking to supporting them in the future.
Thank you. Thanks, Ajmal. But to continue a little bit with the discussion, maybe I can give back the floor to Brian, if that's okay with you. And so you share about your work, you share about the importance to be engaged in these good governance processes, what inspire you, no? Also quoting your grandfather, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe now, if you would have to pass the message to our audience, but to young people in general, why is it actually important for young people to be engaged in these fields? And in particular, as you have been talking about good governance, maybe you want to connect to that. So why is it important to be engaged?
Yeah, actually, it's important for young people to be engaged, especially for young people in the country, because as with what the young people said, young people form a big part of our population. Here in the Philippines, we're around 30% of the population. If we're talking about elections, we are one of the voting blocks, different age brackets. We have a lot at stake when it comes to governance, regardless of where you are in the world, because right now we are facing all sorts of crises. We have the climate crisis, we have the security crisis. The situation on the global arena is becoming more volatile. We have a human rights crisis, and that's something that that I'm seeing right now here in the Philippines. I'm actually experiencing it since I have been intimidated by state forces for what I do. Nonetheless, that has not prevented me from working for human rights. For us, despite the challenges that we may face, be it from the state, be it from our government, be it from our neighbors, families, because sometimes these factors attempt or try to hinder us from proceeding with our advocacy. I think it's important to know that, to remember actually that we have a lot at stake. We have a big interest in what's going to happen in the future, and governance is a big part of that. Governance encompasses all aspects of our social life, from the economic, the social, the political, the cultural, the religious. So government plays a critical role in shaping all of these aspects of our democracy, of our institution, of our democratic institutions. So yeah, young people, since we are the most enthusiastic, we are the most energetic and the most proficient in terms of technology and using social media, we have to use that to shape governance. Because if we do not make any attempt to shape governance, we cannot shape our future, a better future for our generation.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for your words. Also, I liked how you frame it, no? Also, this good governance encompassing so many fields, and the importance also to look into the future, no, as young people, but also being right now the present as well. As many of us, we have been mobilizing around also to actually claim, no, we are not only the future, but already the present, and how we can already take leadership role in these spaces. So Thanks, Brian, for sharing on that. I will just want to check if either Indira. Yes, Indira, I think.
Yeah.
Yes. Could you hear the question, or would you like me to repeat perhaps the question?
If you can repeat, please,
Of
Romran.
course. Yes. So as Brian already replied, but my question was around like, why do you think, or what would you say to young people to actually get engaged in these fields? So why do you think it's actually important that we have young people engaged in the fields such as peace, preventing violent extremism, critical thinking, or good governance, as Brian was sharing?
Yeah, Romana, I think that youth should really engage in peace building and prevention of violent extremism. Why? Because youth are the majority of populations most of the time. Most of the time they are the ones who are recruited, who can be peace advocates and peace ambassadors. So the Salam initiative is a youth-led solution to radicalization of youth, because we should remember that the Boko Haram terrorist groups is an organization that is against education, especially the Western education. So if our observation on the field is the fact that most of those youth that are enrolled in terrorist groups, in Boko Haram group, are those who are not educated.
Very important messages that Indira was sharing that I would like maybe to highlight about this role as young people, as peace advocate, ambassador, and also bringing this youth-led solution. No? So if I understood from the message that Indira wanted to pass also from her intervention here to the question why young people should get engaged in this field, also because many times they're in a very important position, building bridges between maybe local authorities, communities, families, in this case, children. So also they know very well what's happening and how to build these bridges. So I think also looking into those youth-led solution, it's a very important messages that I was understanding, at least from Indira. But maybe we can go to some of the questions. I was also taking notes. Christine, who was asking you, Brian, why did you decide to base your organization on parliament rather than democracy? So maybe, I don't know if you can explain a little bit the focus there, and if there was any conscious decision on like the focus of the organization. So Brian, if you want to comment on that.
All right. Actually, parliamentarism is not really the antithesis of democracy. Actually, parliamentarism emerged from our initial conceptions of what democracy is. So they're not really contradictory ideas. I think we can differentiate parliamentarism better. We use the term parliament in our organization. We based it on parliamentarism because parliamentarism is a very broad idea. It's not only assigned to the kind of political structures in the United Kingdom in the Commonwealth states. So we're talking about parliamentarism. We're talking about different things. It's either a very avid practitioner of parliamentary procedure, of parliamentary law. Secondly, it involves the institution comprised of assemblies of people deciding on matters of public interest or public concern. So these units tend to have smaller units or smaller parliamentary units. But at the end of the day, we always say in our organization that the parliamentarism, its importance comes or emanates from its root word, an old French word, parler, is to talk. So we see it as important to talk about different issues concerning our society. Speech is one of the highest expressions of our humanity. It differentiates us from animals and other beings. So it's something that we as an organization would like to have a working democracy. It's important to have systems that some semblance of parliamentarism, an institution where people are represented, people are allowed to debate really matters concerning our people or our constituents.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. I hope, Christine, that answered to your question. question, and thanks for the question as well. So before we go to some of the questions that can also be replied by you, Ashmal, and hopefully soon by Indira, maybe first you want to share what's the message you would like to pass to the youth to be involved in these fields, in particular in peace building and critical thinking, as is the role or leadership also that you are working quite a lot from your organization. So Ashmal, why do you think it's important for youth to be engaged in this field?
Uh, I believe that our people and people around the world need to understand that youth can lead, and they are leading already with great example. Youth have the passion, ambitions, and the energy that they need support to execute their passion and reality. The support can be technically and financially. I can give the example of Afghanistan. So in Afghanistan, because of 20 and 25 years war, youths have been always been known as offender of violence. But in real life, youths have proven that they can be a good leader around the world in their communities with clear vision and ambitious. So for now, we have a good examples of Afghanistan. So we in the many conflict areas, youths have been appointed to be in the key position. We have governors in the provinces working as youths working as governors, and also especially in the conflict and the rural areas. Most of youths have been working in so many unstable works. So the great example we see that APT and the members in different provinces of Afghanistan, they are leading. Additionally, our network of young and colleagues across the country with less and less available resources, they are working, they are doing their peace building works. Since most of the youths, we have 60% of population in Afghanistan are youths, they are strategically placed in the society to create change in their communities. But sometimes the government is using them as their protections, because they know that youths have studies abroad and they have returned back to their country. They have the knowledge, they have the skills, they have the passion to work for betterment of Afghanistan. With COVID-19 pandemic, we see that Afghan youth people, because most of the elders were in the higher ranks, in the higher risk, we saw that young people are so much needed to be in the front line to fight the crisis. The youths we saw in our members and our colleagues that youths in the different provinces of Afghanistan, because nowadays, like, still there is peace process, there is ongoing war in the most provinces of Afghanistan, but still we see that youths contribute their efforts. They do their campaigns through social media. They help the families. So at the end, we can say that youths can do more, and what they need from international community, they need to that the international community and national community, especially governments, that they should help them in reaching their goals.
Thank you, Ashmal, so much. And actually, I want to take the last part you were sharing to. Maybe I would like to compile many of the questions I could see on the chat box that were really related to what you mentioned, this relationship, cooperation, collaboration with government, local authorities. How does it look like? Does it actually meaningfully work? So maybe the question I would like to ask first, and maybe we can continue with you, Ajmal. I hope you can still hear me properly. But it's like how to engage with government and how to ensure that they consider young people's opinion, recommendation, voices. They actually can include it. They can work together. No, I can see some question on the chat box. Like sometimes young people can be considered as junior. No, their voices are not maybe important or they are not experienced enough. So how or what has been maybe your experience in collaborating with government, with local authorities, that you could maybe share with us, Ajmal?
Yes, I get the question. So, working with the government and also with the local authorities, sometimes for the youths, especially youths of Afghanistan, it's much challenging because youths were always been seen as violence, as victims. So they have always been like from government. They have always been the pressure, but now most of the local authorities, national government, and also international communities saw that the youths are not that youths are not perpetrators of violence. They can do more change. They can bring more change. But what need more youths to take the protection of youths are more important in Afghanistan, since Afghanistan is still going from the war conflict. So still many provinces are under war. There are still we see that if the young generation are being killed, that's why that the national and local authorities are not paving the way for them. So there is need more partnership between civil society, youths with the government, and also the donors to promote youth leadership, and also their capacity to contribute to the peace, and also to push a bit force on the government that the government should pay more attention to the youth. But since the last 2 years, after the resolution of youth peace and security by United Nations of Security Council, the role of youth in peace and security is now being much recognized than before. So now the government is more paying attention to the youth, that they should be in the key leadership position, that they should be in the peace process negotiation between the Taliban, because these youths will be the future of Afghanistan. So if the youths were not been involved in this process, in the peace process, so the peace will not be sustainable.
Thank you, Ajmal. I think strong messages now that you passed, that also putting back in context that we do have now some international framework, as we mentioned on this resolution on youth peace and security, that can actually support to foster partnership with government, local authority, but also with other actors and stakeholders. And also, I could see Indira replying to some question on the chat box, also saying that as young people, we also have to take that responsibility. So, how do we make sure that we already embrace the values of peace building and building partnership when we go towards others, especially to governments and local authorities? Maybe to continue and just before we close, being mindful of time as well, Brian, there was a specific question also on this relationship with government, asking like, how did it work for you, since you were very much involved in the good governance aspect? But also in particular, could you see any impact in the communities? Did that make any change that you could see in reality? So maybe if you can share, and I will ask you to be a little bit short in your answer, if that's okay, just to honor the time of everyone. But thanks in advance, Brian.
I'll make this short. I think I'll focus on the things that I've seen with regards to our work and local government unit in southern Philippines, in the island of Mindanao. So a year ago, I was able to visit Isabela City, island, Basilan. I think that's one of the southernmost cities from General Santos City, country. We're able to have a dialogue with local government officials from the city of Isabela and as well as the entire province of Basilan. We were trying to lobby for human rights legislation, in particular in support of the Human Rights Defenders Protection Bill. So we are currently working with the province and the city of Isabela in crafting a local legislation on human rights and peace building, so that peace builders and human rights defenders can be protected from all sorts of intimidation and reprisal. Um, The country implementing stringent quarantine protocols when government tried to deploy military personnel all over the country to implement a very strict lockdown against the COVID-19 pandemic. I was able to talk with those who works for the vice mayor of that city, in Isabela City, and he said that aside from the fact that they are considering filing of the adoption of a human rights protection legislation in that island and in that city, they are also implementing human rights measures to prevent abuses from the police and the military, the implementation of quarantine protocol. So while the rest of the country was struggling, all sorts of human rights violations in relation to the implementation of these laws against COVID-19, that city and that island was able to enforce humane um, measures against quarantine violators. Nobody or only a few people were arrested. They weren't abused during the arrest. And it kind of goes back to our advocacy for human rights when we visited the island, and also the commitment of local government officials there who have been advocating for peace for decades.
Thank you, Brian. I think very strong points as well, no? Like this example of how we are actually able to influence policies and how we are also able to find allies in those stakeholders. And just to give voice also to Indira, who on the chat box was mentioning something very important, I think it was a very concrete recommendation. She's saying you need to engage the government from the beginning of your actions. Most of the time they are reluctant because we engage in activity without engaging them. So also, how do you engage with those, could be government, could be other stakeholders, but how do you do it and in which moment? So also bearing very much in mind this approach, and as I was mentioning, maybe reminding ourselves of the principle of peace building, no? Also when we engage with others. So thank you, Indira, for mentioning that on the chat box. And maybe to close, because we only have 1 minute, and again, I would like to honor time, but thanks to everyone who asked so many questions. I don't think we managed to actually reply to all, but at least we had a good overview of your work and inspiring example from how to shape those societies to be more peaceful, more just, and more equal. So I would like, Indira, I don't know if you hear me, but if you like to say last words, maybe some advice from the question you saw online, if you would like. She's not there. Okay. So, and I see Ajmal also offline. So unfortunately, we won't be able to give but he's writing. So while I just have a look, maybe Brian, last words, last advice, maybe a message for the young people on how to shape these societies to be more equal, just, and peaceful.
Well,
Brian.
if we want to have a more equal, just, and peaceful society, we need to embody equality, justice, and of course peace. Whenever we're engaging with the government or whether we're engaging with our families, our friends, our communities, we have to embody these values. We have to remove ourselves from the prejudices that we have. I admit I used to be a very prejudiced person. Used to have a lot of against certain groups, against certain people, but because I was able to converse with friends, with people from those sectors, I was enlightened enough to actually carry the struggle with them. So it's important for us to have conversations. Governance begins with conversations. Politics begins with conversations. So, from a good governance advocate, I would like to really encourage everyone to keep talking about these issues confronting our generation. This is not the time to be silent. And I'm speaking now as a youth from the Philippines, where we are experiencing all sorts of human rights violations under the current government. Please do not keep quiet, do not silence yourselves. Keep speaking up, not only for the people of your country, but also to call for a global solidarity so that we can have a more equal, just, and peaceful world, not just a society.
Thank you, Brian. So let's not be silent and let's look towards global solidarity. Indira, last word. I'm able to give you just a few seconds before Saji tell us we really need to end. So if you
Okay.
just want to give very last words to close here and to wrap up the webinar, please, Indira.
Okay, thanks, Homra. So what I want to say is that everyone has his own responsibility in every action to have a just and a peaceful society. So let youth not think that it is the only responsibility is from the government. We are all responsible for the society, so we need to work together. We need to partner and collaborate for us to have that peaceful and just society. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Indira. Very important words. Thank you for bearing with us despite of the difficulties. Thank you, Ajmal, as well. I know he wrote a message on the chat box. So I hope we did our best to honor your experiences, to give that space. Thank you, Saji, for the support. Thank you, everyone, for the question. And thanks again to our host, Education Above All, and being here, everyone, for this very intense conversation. So thank you again to everyone. Bye-bye.
Many thanks to Ramiral and all the inspiring speakers in that discussion for sharing their experience and thoughts on such an important topic. We now head into a 15 minutes break before coming back to our final round of virtual workshops, which of course you can access directly from your dashboard. We kindly ask you to make sure that you get into your preferred workshop on time, and we encourage you on your active participation once again.